The Orc War had ended not with victory, but with exhaustion on both sides, and Ryltha Nightborne stood among the treaty offerings like livestock waiting to be claimed. She kept her chin high despite the shame burning through her chest, despite the way the human lords walked past her and the other orc women as though inspecting horses at market. The Treaty of Bitter Peace demanded exchanges between the races' land, gold, and 20 orc brides to be given to human men willing to take them. Volunteers, they had called them, but Ryltha knew the truth. She and the others were the unwanted ones, the orphans and outcasts, the daughters with no fathers to protect them or brothers to hide them away. Her own clan had cast her out 3 years ago when she had spoken against raiding a human village where children played. Weakness, they had called it. Sympathy for the enemy. Now she stood in the great stone courtyard between territories, wearing the only dress she owned, a rough spun gray thing that hung awkwardly on her muscular frame. Around her, the other orc women waited with varying expressions of fear, resignation, or carefully hidden rage. The autumn wind bit through the thin fabric, and Ryltha fought the urge to wrap her arms around herself. Show no weakness, not here, not now. The human men who came to inspect them were mostly older lords seeking servants or young nobles looking for the thrill of claiming an orc bride as some kind of trophy. They asked crude questions, made demands to see teeth and hands, assessed strength and potential for labor. One by one, the orc women were chosen and led away. Ryltha watched them go, each departure tightening the knot of dread in her stomach. By the time the sun reached its peak, only 3 orc women remained unclaimed, and Ryltha was one of them. Too tall, perhaps. Too obviously strong, her shoulders broad and her hands calloused from years of surviving alone in the borderlands. Her tusks, though small by orc standards, still protruded enough to mark her as other. Monstrous, unwanted even in this desperate exchange. The human overseer, a tired-looking official with ink-stained fingers, consulted his ledger with increasing agitation. "We need 3 more men willing to fulfill the treaty terms," he called out to the remaining crowd. "The agreement must be honored in full." A few human men lingered at the edges of the courtyard, but they turned away when the overseer's gaze fell upon them. Ryltha felt something cold settle in her chest. What would happen to the unclaimed? Would they be returned to the orc territories in disgrace? Sold to whoever would take them? Left to wander the no-man's land between territories until winter claimed them? "I will take one." The voice was quiet but steady, and it came from a direction Ryltha had not been watching. She turned, as did everyone else, to see a man approaching from the road. He was human, perhaps 30 years of age, with brown hair that needed cutting and the weathered face of someone who spent his days under the sun. He wore simple clothes, a farmer's clothes, and walked with a slight limp that suggested an old injury. Nothing about him spoke of wealth or status, yet he moved through the courtyard with a calm dignity that made others step aside. The overseer looked him up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "Name and holdings?" "Edmund Fairmont." "I have a farmstead 2 days north of here, in the valley below Crow's Ridge. 40 acres, a house, barn, and livestock. I can provide for a wife." The overseer made a note. "Choose, then." Edmund's eyes moved across the 3 remaining orc women, and Ryltha forced herself to meet his gaze when it reached her. Let him see that she was not broken, even if she was unwanted. His eyes were gray, she noticed, the color of river stones, and they held no cruelty that she could detect. No hunger for domination or possession. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted, not disgust, but what might have been recognition of some kind. Understanding, perhaps, of what it meant to be the one left behind. Her, Edmund said, pointing to Ryltha. If she is willing. The overseer blinked. Willing? The treaty does not require their I do, Edmund interrupted, his voice firmer now. He turned to Ryltha fully. My name is Edmund Fairmont. I have a farm that needs tending and a home that has been empty too long. I am offering you a place there as my wife if you are willing to come. I will not force you, but I promise you will be safe, fed, and treated with respect. Ryltha stared at him, unable to process what was happening. No one had asked her. Not when her clan cast her out, not when the treaty collectors came, not when she was brought here to stand in this courtyard. No one had cared what she was willing to do. And now this human farmer, this limping man with kind eyes, was asking her to choose. Something broke inside her chest. Some dam that had been holding back 3 years of fear and loneliness and desperate pride. Tears burned hot in her eyes, and she hated them, hated the weakness they represented. But they came anyway, spilling down her green cheeks as she stared at this stranger who had done something no one else had thought to do. He had chosen her, not because she was available or convenient, but because when he looked at her, he had seen someone worth asking. I am willing, she managed, her voice rough and thick. I will come. The overseer completed the paperwork with bureaucratic efficiency, and within an hour, Ryltha found herself walking north on a dirt road beside Edmund Fairmont, her few possessions tied in a bundle on her back. He had a wagon waiting just beyond the courtyard, pulled by a patient gray mare, and he offered to let Ryltha ride while he walked, but she refused. She had walked farther on worse days, and she would not start this strange new arrangement by taking advantage of his kindness. They traveled in silence for the first hour, the awkwardness between them thick as fog. Ryltha did not know what to say to this man who was now, legally and officially, her husband. The ceremony at the altar had been brief and bloodless, just a signing of names and the speaking of binding words. She wore no ring, carried no flowers. It had not felt like a wedding, and yet it had been one. Edmund seemed content with the silence, but as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, he finally spoke. We will camp here for the night. There is a stream just down the slope where we can get water. Ryltha nodded and helped him unhitch the mare. She moved automatically, checking the animal's hooves and withers with practiced efficiency. When she looked up, she found Edmund watching her with a thoughtful expression. You know horses, he observed. I know animals. I have spent the last 3 years surviving in the borderlands. You learn what you need to know. Your clan cast you out. It was not a question. Ryltha's jaw tightened. Yes, I was weak. I spoke against violence when violence was called for. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Edmund was quiet for a moment, building a fire ring with stones from the stream bed. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. I was a soldier once, fought in the early years of the war. I saw things that made me sick, things I could not stomach anymore, so I left. Deserted, some would say. I came to the valley and bought land with what little I had saved, and I have been farming ever since. Some people call that weakness too. Cowardice. Ryltha looked at him with new eyes, seeing the limp in a different light, seeing the way he moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned not to draw attention. You left the war. I did, and I do not regret it. He met her gaze. Strength is not always about fighting, Ryltha. Sometimes it is about knowing when to walk away. Her name sounded strange in his mouth, the syllables unfamiliar to a human tongue, but he said it with care. Respect. She swallowed the thickness in her throat and turned away to gather firewood before he could see the tears threatening again. They ate a simple meal of bread and dried meat, and Edmund offered her the single bedroll he had brought, insisting he could sleep near the fire. Ryltha refused at first, but he was stubborn in a quiet way that wore down her protests. She lay awake for a long time, staring up at the stars through the branches overhead, listening to the sound of Edmund's breathing across the fire. He had fallen asleep quickly, the sleep of someone with a clear conscience, or perhaps just the exhaustion of a farmer at the end of a long day. They reached the farm late the following afternoon, and Ryltha felt her breath catch despite herself. The valley was beautiful, tucked between rolling hills and carpeted in the gold and amber of autumn. Edmund's farmstead sat at the base of a gentle slope, a sturdy stone house with a thatched roof, a large barn that had been recently repaired, and fields that showed evidence of careful tending. Chickens scratched in a yard, and a few cows grazed in a nearby pasture. It was not grand, but it was real, solid, a home. "It is not much," Edmund said, and she could hear the uncertainty in his voice, "but it is enough." "It is more than I have had in 3 years," Ryltha said honestly. He showed her the house, pointing out the main room with its hearth and table, the loft where he slept, and a small side room that he had clearly prepared for her. There was a bed frame with a straw mattress, a chest for belongings, and a window that looked out over the valley. Simple but clean and private. "I thought you would want your own space," Edmund said, standing in the doorway. "I know this is not a normal marriage. I do not expect anything from you except help with the farm if you are willing to give it. And if you are not, I will not force you. You can leave whenever you wish. I will not stop you." Ryltha turned to face him, studying this strange man who kept offering her choices. "Why did you come to the treaty altar? Why did you choose to take an orc bride?" Edmund leaned against the doorframe, his expression distant. "I have been alone here for 5 years. It is a hard life and a lonely one. I thought about going to the town to find a human wife, but the women there want someone whole, someone who did not desert the army and shame his family name. And I thought about what it means to be unwanted, to be cast aside. When I heard about the treaty, about the exchange, I thought maybe there was someone else out there who understood what that felt like. Someone who needed a place as much as I needed company." He paused, then added quietly, "And when I saw you standing there, trying so hard to be proud even though you were terrified, I saw myself 5 years ago. I thought maybe we could help each other." Ryltha felt the tears again, and this time she did not fight them. She let them fall, these tears that were not from fear or shame, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen, of being chosen not despite what she was, but because of it. "Thank you," she whispered, "for asking." Edmund nodded, his own eyes bright with emotion he did not try to hide. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a full day. Harvest time waits for no one." The next weeks fell into a pattern that was both strange and comforting. Ryltha woke before dawn, as was her habit, and found Edmund already in the barn tending the animals. They worked side by side in companionable silence, mucking stalls and feeding livestock, and then moved to the fields where the last of the harvest needed gathering before the first frost. Edmund had been right about the work. It was constant and demanding, but Ryltha found she did not mind. Her orc strength, so often seen as frightening or masculine, was an asset here. She could lift what Edmund could not, could work longer without tiring, could help in ways that made his life genuinely easier. And Edmund, for his part, treated her like a partner. He asked her opinion on which fields to clear for winter planting, showed her how to preserve vegetables in the root cellar, taught her the names of the neighboring farms even though he warned her that the neighbors might not be welcoming at first. He never demanded, never raised his voice, never looked at her with anything but quiet respect. "You are good at this," he said one afternoon as they repaired a section of fence. "Farming, I mean, it suits you." Ryltha straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. "I like working with my hands. I like seeing the results of labor. In the borderlands, everything was survival. Nothing was built, nothing grew. Here there is purpose. Edmund smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger. I felt the same way when I first came here, like I had found something worth protecting. As the weeks turned into months, something shifted between them. The awkwardness faded, replaced by easy conversation and shared laughter. Edmund told her stories about his childhood in a village to the south, about his years as a soldier, about the day he decided to desert, and the terror and relief that had warred within him. Ryltha, in turn, told him about her clan, about the traditions and honor codes that had both sustained and suffocated her, about the day she had been cast out and the long, lonely years that followed. "You miss it?" Edmund asked one evening as they sat by the hearth, the first snow of winter falling softly outside. "Your clan, your people," Ryltha considered the question carefully. "I miss what I thought they were, the idea of belonging somewhere, of having family, but the reality was harder than the idea. They valued strength, but only certain kinds of strength. They valued honor, but only the honor that came from battle. There was no room for questions, for doubt, no room for people like me." She looked at Edmund. "Do you miss the army?" "No," he said without hesitation. "I miss the camaraderie sometimes, the sense of brotherhood, but I do not miss the killing, the orders that made no sense, the waste of it all. I am glad I left, even if it cost me everything else." "It did not cost you everything," Ryltha said softly. "You have this farm, this life." Edmund met her eyes across the firelight. "And now I have you. That is more than I thought I would ever have again." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to name. Ryltha felt her heart beating too fast, felt the warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She had not expected this, had not prepared for the possibility that this arrangement of convenience could become something real. But it was becoming real. She could feel it in the way her eyes sought him out across the fields, in the way she had started making his favorite meals, in the way she caught herself smiling at his small jokes and careful kindnesses. She was falling in love with Edmund Fairmont, this quiet farmer who had chosen her when no one else would. Winter deepened, and the farm settled into the slower rhythms of the cold season. There was still work, animals to tend, wood to chop, repairs to make before spring, but the urgency of harvest had passed. Ryltha found herself spending more time in the house, learning to cook human dishes, mending clothes by the fire while Edmund carved tools or read from his small collection of books. One evening, he began reading aloud, a collection of old poems about love and loss. His voice was pleasant, steady and warm, and Ryltha found herself listening not to the words but to the sound of him, the comfort of his presence. When he finished and looked up, he caught her watching him. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Ryltha hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I am thinking that I am happy here, happier than I have been in years, maybe happier than I have ever been." Edmund set the book aside carefully. "I am happy too. You have made this place feel like a home again, Ryltha. More than that, you have made me feel like I am not just existing anymore. Like I am living." "Edmund," she began, but he held up a hand. "Let me say this. I know when we married it was not for love, it was pragmatic, a solution to both our problems. But somewhere along the way things changed for me. You changed them. I find myself thinking about you when you are not near. I find myself wanting to make you smile, to hear your laugh. I find myself caring about your happiness more than my own." He took a breath. "I am falling in love with you, Ryltha Nightborne, and I needed you to know." Ryltha felt the tears again, but this time they were purely tears of joy. She crossed the space between them and knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "I love you too," she said, her voice shaking. "I did not think I was capable of it anymore, did not think anyone could see past what I am to who I am. But you did. You saw me, Edmund, and you chose me. Not just at the treaty altar, but every day since. You choose me every day." He reached up and cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "You are easy to choose, Ryltha. You are strong and kind and brave. You are everything I could have hoped for and more." She leaned forward and he met her halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deeper, more certain. It was a kiss that tasted of promises and possibilities, of two broken people finding wholeness in each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "Stay with me," Edmund whispered. "Not in the side room, not as a hired hand or a treaty obligation. Stay with me as my wife, truly. Share my bed and my life and my future." "Yes," Ryltha said, and it was the easiest answer she had ever given. "Yes, I will stay." That night, Ryltha moved her few belongings from the side room to the loft, and they lay together in Edmund's bed, holding each other as the snow fell outside and the fire crackled below. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with the same patience they had learned each other's hearts. It was sweet and intense and real, and when Ryltha finally fell asleep in Edmund's arms, she felt truly safe for the first time in years. Spring came with a rush of green and the return of hard work. The fields needed plowing, seeds needed planting, and the animals were heavy with young. Ryltha threw herself into the labor, her body strong and capable, her heart light with purpose and love. Edmund worked beside her, and together they transformed the farm into something thriving and productive. The neighbors, who had been wary at first, began to come around. They had heard about the orc bride. Of course, gossip traveled fast in the valley, but Ryltha won them over with quiet competence and genuine warmth. She helped birth a neighbor's calf when complications arose, used her strength to help another neighbor repair a collapsed roof, and shared vegetables from their abundant garden. Slowly, grudgingly, the humans of the valley began to accept her. Not everyone was kind. There were some who muttered about monsters and abominations, who made signs against evil when she passed. But Edmund stood by her always, his presence a steady anchor, and Ryltha found she could bear the prejudice when she knew she had him to come home to. One afternoon in late spring, as they were planting the last field, a rider came up the road at a gallop. Edmund straightened, his hand instinctively going to the knife at his belt, and Ryltha moved to stand beside him. The rider was young, barely more than a boy, and he was breathing hard. "Mr. Fairmont, there is trouble in the village. A group of orc raiders came down from the mountains. They are demanding food and supplies, threatening violence if they do not get it. The militia has been called, but we are outnumbered. We need everyone who can fight." Edmund's face went pale and Ryltha felt her stomach drop. Orc raiders, her people, or what they had become without the treaty to constrain them. She looked at Edmund and saw the conflict in his eyes. He had left the army, had vowed never to fight again, but these were his neighbors, his community. "I will go," Ryltha said quietly. Both Edmund and the boy stared at her. "You," the boy said, his voice cracking. "But you are an orc," Ryltha finished. "Yes, which means I know how they think, how they fight, and I speak their language. Maybe I can negotiate. Maybe I can stop this without bloodshed." Edmund grabbed her arm, his face tight with fear. "It is too dangerous. They cast you out, Ryltha. They might kill you on sight, or they might listen. It is worth trying." She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "This is my home too now. These people are my people, even if some of them do not know it yet. Let me protect them. Let me show them that orcs can be more than raiders and monsters." Edmund held her gaze for a long moment, then pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Be careful, come back to me." "Always," she promised. They rode hard for the village, arriving to find it in chaos. The orc raiders, numbering about 15, had taken position in the town square, armed and aggressive. The human militia, a ragtag group of farmers and shopkeepers with hunting bows and old swords, had formed a defensive line, but they were clearly outmatched. Ryltha could see the fear in their faces, could smell the tension in the air. One wrong move and this would become a bloodbath. She dismounted and walked forward, her hands raised and empty. "I wish to speak to your leader," she called out in Orcish, her voice ringing clear. The raiders turned as one, surprise evident on their faces. One of them, a large male with elaborate scars and heavy armor, stepped forward. "Who are you to speak our tongue, human lover?" Ryltha stood tall. "I am Ryltha Nightborne, daughter of Gruul the Strong, formerly of the Bloodpeak clan. I was cast out for showing mercy, and I wear that shame as a badge of honor. You are on human land now, protected by the Treaty of Bitter Peace. If you break that treaty, you bring war down on all our people again." The leader spat. "The treaty is a chain. Our people starve in the mountains while humans grow fat in the valleys. Then petition for aid through the proper channels. Negotiate, but do not raid like common thieves. You demean yourselves and give the humans reason to hate us more. You speak of honor while you bed a human," the leader sneered. "You are worth less than nothing, outcast." Edmund stepped forward then, moving to stand beside Ryltha despite the danger. "She is worth more than all of you combined," he said quietly. "She has shown me that orcs can be honorable, compassionate, strong in ways that matter. She is my wife, and I am proud of that." The orc leader laughed, a harsh sound. "Touching. The human and his pet monster." Ryltha felt rage rise in her chest, but before she could respond, another voice rang out. "Enough." An older orc woman stepped forward from the raiding party, her face weathered and wise. Ryltha recognized her. Vera the Elder, once a counselor to the clan chief. "I know this girl," Vera said. "I know what she was cast out for. She argued for peace, for finding another way. She was right then, and she is right now." The old woman turned to the leader. "Look around you. We are outnumbered and far from support. The humans have archers positioned on the rooftops. They let us come here to talk because the girl asked them to. If we fight, we die, all of us. Is your pride worth that?" The leader's jaw worked, his hands clenching on his weapon. Finally, he looked at Ryltha. "What would you have us do, outcast? Go back to the mountains? Send emissaries to the Treaty Council and ask for aid properly. The war is over. We do not have to be enemies anymore, but you have to take the first step toward peace." There was a long, tense silence. Then Vera spoke again. "She offers you a way out with honor intact, Toruk. Take it." The leader, Toruk, stared at Ryltha for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We will go. But know this, Ryltha Nightborne, you are still outcast. You will never be welcome among the clans again." "I know," Ryltha said. "I have found a new clan, a new home. I do not need your acceptance." The orc raiders withdrew, their retreat watched carefully by the human militia until they disappeared into the forest. When they were finally gone, a collective sigh of relief went through the village. The mayor, a stout man with a graying beard, approached Ryltha and Edmund cautiously. "You saved us," he said, his voice gruff. "That could have gone very badly." "I did what anyone would do to protect their home," Ryltha said simply. The mayor nodded slowly, then extended his hand. "You are welcome in this village, Ryltha Fairmont, both of you." Ryltha shook his hand, feeling the weight of acceptance settle over her. Edmund wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close, and she leaned into him, exhausted and relieved. They rode back to the farm as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of gold and orange. Neither spoke for a long time, content to simply be together, alive and safe. When they finally reached home, Edmund helped her down from the horse and held her for a long moment. "You were magnificent," he said into her hair. "Brave and wise and strong. I have never been more proud of anyone in my life." Ryltha pulled back to look at him, her heart full to bursting. "I could not have done it without you. You stood beside me even when it put you in danger. You called me your wife in front of everyone, orc and human alike. You claimed me, Edmund. In front of all the people who think our love is wrong or shameful." "Because I am not ashamed," Edmund said fiercely. "I am proud to be your husband, Ryltha, proud to build a life with you, and I want the whole world to know it." She kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into it. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. Summer came in full, and with it, a steady stream of visitors to the farm. Some came out of curiosity, wanting to see the orc woman who had saved the village. Others came seeking advice, having heard that Ryltha could speak both languages and might serve as a bridge between the communities. Still others came simply because they had heard that Edmund Fairmont made the best ale in the valley, and his wife told interesting stories. Ryltha found herself becoming part of the community in ways she had never imagined possible. She taught some of the village children about tracking and wilderness survival. She helped translate for the treaty emissaries when they came through. She worked with Vera, who had left the raiding party and sought asylum in the valley, to establish better communication channels between the orc clans and the human settlements. It was not always easy. There were setbacks and misunderstandings, moments when old prejudices flared up on both sides. But slowly, painfully, things began to change. More orc families came down from the mountains, seeking peaceful settlement. More humans opened their doors and their minds to the possibility that the war did not have to define the future. And through it all, Ryltha and Edmund were happy. Their farm prospered, their love deepened, and their life together became a testament to the power of choosing kindness over fear, of seeing the person behind the prejudice. One evening in late autumn, exactly a year after their first meeting at the treaty altar, Edmund took Ryltha's hand and led her to the hill overlooking their farm. The valley spread out below them, beautiful and peaceful in the fading light. "A year ago I went to that altar not knowing what I would find," Edmund said. "I hoped for a companion, maybe a partner, but I found so much more. I found love, Ryltha. Real, true, deep love. You have made me whole again." Ryltha leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling perfectly content. "A year ago, I stood at that altar believing I was unwanted, believing no one would ever choose me. And then you did. You asked me if I was willing, and that question changed my entire life. You gave me back my humanity, Edmund. You made me feel like I mattered." "You do matter," Edmund said, turning to face her. "You matter to me, to this community, to everyone whose life you have touched, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring. "I know we are already married, but I want to do this properly, the way it should have been done. Ryltha Nightborne Fairmont, will you marry me again? Will you stand with me in front of the whole village and pledge your love, not because a treaty demands it, but because your heart chooses it?" Ryltha felt the tears she had come to associate with happiness flowing freely now. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, Edmund, 1,000 times yes." They were married again in the village square on a crisp winter morning, surrounded by friends and neighbors, both human and orc. Ryltha wore a dress that the village seamstress had made for her, green as her skin but beautiful in its simplicity. Edmund wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes shining with love and pride. The mayor officiated, speaking words about love transcending boundaries, about courage and hope and new beginnings. When it came time for the vows, Edmund spoke first. "Ryltha, you came into my life when I had given up on happiness. You showed me that strength comes in many forms, that honor is not about fighting but about how we treat each other. I vow to choose you every day, to stand beside you always, to love you with everything I am." Ryltha's voice was steady despite her tears. "Edmund, you saw me when I was invisible, chose me when I was unwanted, loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a home and a purpose, and a future I never dreamed possible. I vow to honor that gift every day, to build a life with you that proves love is stronger than fear, that kindness is stronger than hatred." When they kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers, human and orc voices mingling in celebration. It was a sound of hope, of possibility, of a future being built one choice at a time. The feast that followed was abundant, tables groaning with food from both cultures, music and dancing and laughter filling the square. Ryltha and Edmund moved through the celebration hand in hand, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but their eyes kept finding each other, speaking wordless promises of the life they would continue to build together. As the sun set and the stars emerged, they slipped away from the party and walked back to their farm, to the home they had made together. The house glowed warm with firelight, the barn stood solid and secure, and the fields lay ready for the spring planting that would come. Edmund pulled Ryltha close as they stood in the doorway, looking out over their land. "Are you happy?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "I am more than happy," Ryltha said. "I am home, truly home for the first time in my life." "Then my work here is done," Edmund teased, and she laughed, the sound bright and free. They went inside and closed the door against the winter cold, but the warmth between them needed no fire to sustain it. They had each other, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. In the years that followed, their farm became a symbol of what was possible when people chose love over fear. Other mixed marriages followed, tentative at first but growing more common as time passed. The valley became a place where orc and human children played together, where the old hatreds began to fade into memory. Ryltha and Edmund had children of their own, beautiful blends of both heritages, and they raised them with the values that had brought their parents together: kindness, courage, and the understanding that every person deserves to be chosen, to be seen, to be loved. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the children were asleep, Ryltha and Edmund would sit by the fire and remember that day at the treaty altar. The day when a kind man had looked at an unwanted orc woman and asked her to choose him back. The day when both their lives had changed forever, all because someone had cared enough to ask. Ryltha never forgot the tears she had cried that day, not tears of fear or sorrow, but tears of gratitude and hope. She had cried because for the first time in so long, someone had seen her worth. And in seeing it, Edmund had helped her see it too. Their love story became legend in the valley, told and retold to children on both sides. A reminder that the greatest strength lies not in the ability to fight, but in the courage to love. And every time the story was told, it ended the same way. With two people, different in every way that was supposed to matter, choosing each other again and again, building a life that proved love could bridge any divide. They lived long and happy lives, Ryltha and Edmund Fairmont, and when they were old and gray, sitting on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the fields they had worked together for so many years, they still held hands, still chose each other, still marveled at the miracle of a love that had begun at a treaty altar, with tears of joy and a simple question: "Are you willing?" And the answer, always and forever, was yes.